Right. Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome back to CocoaHeads for 2023. Good to see everyone. As always, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. A little bit of housekeeping as always. So, hey, I'm Zach, and we've got Christian up the front here. We help run CocoaHeads. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns tonight, please come and speak to one of us. As always, a massive thank you to our sponsor, Vilu, for providing the venue that we're all in tonight, and also for providing the food and helping with all of our ancillary costs as well. They're going to be helping out a lot this year, and we're really thankful to them for the support that they provide, because they make the meetup possible. Now, Sydney CocoaHeads has a code of conduct. We want everyone to feel welcome and included at our events. You can read it in full on the website, but it boils down to a few key points, and they are to be respectful, be inclusive, and be aware. If you have any questions or issues, please come speak to myself or Christian tonight. We have a Slack community. It's not super active at the moment, but if you'd like to change that, you can join and start chatting in there. Got a general channel sort of for all things iOS dev or Apple related. We've also got a jobs channel for anyone who might be looking for work, or for anyone who's looking to fill a role. I can post in there. The link can be, let me join this. Yeah, sorry, the link is on screen and you can join at that URL. Now, I know there's a few people attending for the first time tonight. Hands up if you are. Welcome. Round of applause. We hope you enjoy. If you like what you see here tonight, I'd also recommend checking out Melbourne CocoaHeads. So they run on the second Thursday of the month. We run on the third, and they also have an excellent live stream usually, so you can jump online and check that out. Now, a little call out to a few conferences that are up and coming. The AUC is running DevWorld again, so that's happening at the end of March. That's in Melbourne. That hasn't run for a few years now, but it's great to see that it's back. And they're also combining it with another conference that they run, XWorld, which is a conference for sort of people who manage and deploy Apple devices in an education-focused environment, like universities and things like that. For people who don't know, the AUC run, I think they used to run 3 conferences throughout the year. And one of them is DevWorld, which is the iOS one, and it's obviously merging with another one. But well worth checking out if you're interested in attending an iOS conference in Australia. It's been a good event in the past, and I'm sure this year will be no exception. There's full details on the website, and I think they've just put up links to buy a ticket, so that might be happening very soon. So it won't be too long and you can buy tickets. There's also a brand new Swift conference happening in Chicago. It's happening at the end of April. It's called Deep Dish Swift. And yeah, the details are again on their website, but it looks like a pretty cool conference with a good lineup of speakers. They seem to have a talk for everyone, whether you're sort of an indie working by yourself or part of a big team. There's a sort of pretty wide array of speakers, and it looks pretty cool. So looking ahead, got a busy few months. Stay tuned for details about our March event. We'll post them on the meetup page at least a week before, possibly a bit more if we have that sorted. April will be as normal, so on the third Thursday, that's the 20th, and we're always looking for talks. So if there's anything you'd like to talk about, if you'd like to give a lightning talk or a full-length talk, anything's fine. If you'd like to run an idea by me, feel free to get in touch, just send me a message. I'm happy to give feedback or sort of help get a talk to a point where you feel comfortable giving it. Anything goes, so please get in touch if you'd like. All right, so what's on tonight? Well, we've just had the housekeeping. We'll also do a section if you're looking for work or if you are hiring. And after that, we'll get straight into a talk from Dan. The talk will be remote on Zoom, but it's about accessibility. And following that, we have a presentation from Mike. Looking forward to both of these. Now, is there anyone who'd like to give a plug for either a job they're looking to fill or if they're looking for work themselves? Crickets. Okay, moving on. Right, let's get into Dan's talk. I'll stop. Just these easy guys.
Cool. So I will be talking about accessibility must-haves. I'm sure some of you already know me. I'm Daniel Sloan. I'm a lead iOS engineer at Blue. I wish I could be in Sydney today, but I'm here in Melbourne. So I hope everybody's enjoying Sydney in the office. So accessibility must-have. So this kind of came out of working with a bunch of clients in the past that didn't really care much about accessibility. You bring it up, they say, that's not our roadmap, that's not who we want to support. And I don't really think those are good answers to have, particularly when you want to support your apps across for everybody, make it very inclusive. And so I think at least we should be supporting at least something accessibility and start moving towards that. And so this is just going to be looking at what we should be having and as a bare minimum. And there's also some simple features that we can support that will enable other accessibility features to open up as well. So let's take a look. Actually, 1 in 7 people have a disability, and it can actually be anyone regardless of age. So it could be just a disability where you fell and you hurt your arm and you can't really use it that well. And so the range of motion causes you grief when you try to use your phone. There's accessibility features that you can enable to allow you to do that. And being able to support that is a very big deal. And they actually, it actually falls into 4 different domains. So vision, it could be color blindness, blind, just vision difficulty that could make focusing difficult. We also have hearing, which may be deaf, partial hearing loss, or difficulty hearing sounds within a certain range. And then we have a mobility, which such as the issue where you might have fell and hurt your arm and you can't really tap on a screen. Or cognitive, where you have difficulty remembering certain sequences of steps or complex user interfaces. And these are just some of the accessibility features that are supported on Apple platform. There's plenty more that is available. The bolded text will be the ones I will be highlighting today. I also believe that, you know, if you work in a team and maybe the upper stakeholders don't want to support it, as developers, you probably could get away with just doing some of these as a bare minimum if it doesn't affect your velocity too much, such as making sure your voiceover is correct or the reduce motion, which are very, could be very simple to just check and add in. Whereas dark mode, dynamic type, or color contrast, you probably will have to chat with a designer and to go through the colors and making sure the layout fits for your font sizes for dynamic type. So dark mode. For that, we would really want to aim for sufficient color contrast in all appearances, and also soften the color of white backgrounds. This will help people who suffer from photophobia, sensitivity to light, be able to use your app a bit easier. Also, it's just the ease of use in low light conditions and reduces your eye strain. And as we can see here on the right side, I've used ABC News for an example. The left is light mode and right is dark mode, and it's very, very easy to look at on the dark mode side. I'm a big dark mode person. I personally use it for everything, so it's very, very calming for my eyes. And then we have color. There's a wide variety of color support within the Apple ecosystem. So if you use color to convey information, you want to be sure to provide text labels or glyph shapes to help everyone perceive it. So if we look here on the right where the images are, you can actually see with your activity rings, you actually have these symbols on that. And so that actually helps indicate what is what. And if you look on the right side, you can still see those, but some of those colors are slightly darker, and that's because that's somebody who suffers from red-green color blindness. They actually see it that way. So if your colors aren't quite correct, you could actually provide the wrong information and or make that particular part of your app very unusable for people with color blindness. And color blindness actually comes in various forms. So blue, distinguishing blue from orange, red and green, red and black. However, there's software, there's image editing software that you can actually use to proof for color blindness and help check if it meets certain standards. And as well, we want to make, we can actually make these with color, dark mode and also color contrast. We can actually very easily support this if you take in effect the asset catalogs. So asset catalogs came out, I think iOS 12 or 13, if I'm remembering correctly. But essentially, you can support light and dark mode and let the system take over from there. But within that color in the asset catalog, you can actually enable invert colors and increase contrast, and actually add colors for those as well, which would be a huge win for both the dark mode and also this color contrasting itself. Now moving on to dynamic type or dynamic font size, we really want to look at keeping text truncation to the minimum as the font size increases, and aim to display as much useful information as useful text as we can at the largest font size. So if we compare the photos on the left versus the right, we can actually look and see, particularly with the email at the top with John Appleseed at 2. On the left, it's all basically just horizontal, and you can see everything, get all the information you want. On the right side, as the size increases, you can see the JA for John Appleseed has moved up, and then the 2 is truncated, and then you have details actually move down vertically. So just moving around your layout just a bit to be able to support certain things goes a long way. And such as in the 2 email case where it truncates, you most likely already know the email, so you don't really need to most likely see most of that. So good to keep that in mind as well. And as I mentioned just now, adjusting layout at large font sizes is very crucial. And this one actually also shows it in a bit more depth with the date and the attachment pin clip moving down vertically, where it was before the font size increase, it was just still basically horizontal on the right side. As well, it's going to 1, so it just essentially just truncates his last name. And now with VoiceOver, we want to really provide alternative descriptions for all images that convey meaning. And when an image is purely decorative, though, we want to hide it from assistive technologies so it doesn't confuse whoever may be using it as to why there might be redundant information or just random text from that. And we want to give each screen a unique title and provide headings and make sure VoiceOver users can navigate to every element within. However, probably grouping of some sort might be useful in cases where you're on a cell and there's images and text all within a collection cell or a table view cell. We probably want to group that cell together and read that information out as instead of trying to go into each single bit in that cell. So being able to specify how those elements should be is very crucial as well. And now with reduced motion, people can turn on reduced motion if they tend to get distracted, experience dizziness, or nausea when viewing animations that include effects such as zooming, scaling, spinning, or any type of motion. So tighten up your springs to reduce bounce effects, avoid animating depth changes on the x-axis, avoid animating into or out of blurs, and replace a slide with a fade to avoid motion. And as we'll see with the weather app, with reduce motion off, there's a couple interesting points to watch for here. The text, the keyboard actually is a modal up. And then when it goes over to the map, it actually is also a modal as well. And so those, if we look at what with it actually turned on, we will see they actually kind of just fade in per se. It's kind of harder on that video to see the keyboard. It kind of also modals as well on that keyboard, but when you're using it, it actually comes in as a modal, not a modal, as a just as a fade in. And as you saw on the map here, it's actually just kind of fades in as well. There's also other options with these reduced motion on. You can add crossfade to it as well if you like. That is also accessibility option. And with reduced motion, it's actually really easy to support. It's just reduced motion, and then you can either do the animation or just replace all those values with what you originally intended to be the final ones. And we just have this link here. Pretty much everything I talked about can be found at the human interface guidelines that Apple provides. And yep, so that's the end of my talk. Any questions?
I'll give you one. What would you say is the biggest, like what sort of accessibility feature takes you the furthest, the quickest? Like where should you begin? And what's one of the hardest sort of problems to solve in terms of accessibility?
I think so. The easiest, I think, one would always be the reduced motion because you can just check. But if we wanted to go a bit further, I think supporting dark mode with the asset catalog is also very easy in terms of you just need to chat with some designers just to confirm what the colors would be in a dark mode situation. So, and just letting the system take effect. And oftentimes, actually, you get, if you don't do any, like create your own custom button, you essentially get a lot of accessibility for free as well. So oftentimes you may not even need to add your own custom accessibility setup if you just inherit from the right, essentially the right UI elements. I think the hardest one, I think that one could go a lot of directions, but I think making sure that particularly if you're supporting both landscape and portrait, and also on both the phone and iPad, I think making sure it looks right and feels right on dynamic type as the font size increases is on the iPad and landscape. If the text is 300%, does it look right? Does it break anything? I think just making sure across all those might be one of the more tricky ones.
I'd probably throw in a couple of other cases. The custom view thing, where someone's built something without thinking about accessibility at all. When you try to implement it, you find that the whole structure is wrong. So you largely rewrite it or completely change the grouping and the layers and whatever. That can be horribly complicated just to get basic voiceover to work. Really basic.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people make UI view and just make a button out of it, and you lose all the accessibility things that Apple provides. So then you have to go through heaps of just accessibility setup to do it yourself, which is not great. So make sure to use what is provided instead of growing your own.
Any other questions?
You might have mentioned this, sorry, I was a little bit late, but are there any major differences between UIKit and Swift UI accessibility?
Yeah, so I think overall, like, there is, and I don't know too much, like I haven't dived enough into all the accessibility goodness that Swift UI provides, but I will say overall, the accessibility side of things for Swift UI is actually slightly more straightforward, particularly say with font size increases. I don't know the rest off the top of my head that would be entirely super different, just given I've unfortunately not done a lot of accessibility on Swift UI yet, but hopefully soon. There's actually one cool thing that came out last year that I might do part 2 talk on, which is audio graphs for charts, where it kind of goes higher and lower sounds to describe what the chart does. So I think that's really cool.
Swift UI has some much more sophisticated ways of combining children. So if you've got lots of components, you've got a whole set of primitives that lets you say how you're going to combine the properties of the children, which isn't there in UIKit. So it's much nicer in that way.
Yeah, and I think the charts framework is really good about that as well, where you can group together
16 plus.
Yeah. Get on it.
Does that improve like voiceover or focus kind of functionality?
Sorry?
Does that improve like default voiceover and focus functionality?
Not particularly, no. I mean, but the focus is better anyway, the way it's grouped in Swift UI. So it's much easier to move your properties around in your views, in your Swift UI views. So
Do you use Reveal at all? And if not, when would you?
Yeah, look, I have used Reveal. I don't really use it too often, mostly because some of the projects I work on, they have to be supported by the client for that. Like the client needs to provide the keys and stuff and need to chat around it. But I think it's very handy, particularly with accessibility features that they added last year to be able to see, is this accessible? Are you able to hook into that? And just the generalness of Reveal, I think is very handy to have in general. However, my workflow doesn't really usually involve that. But I think if you might be kind of confused with, say, a view and why is this view doing this when it should do this, and I think Reveal is definitely going to be a lot more handier than the I always just call it the explosion view. I don't really know the true name for it, the one that's in the Xcode itself. Reveal gives you a lot more information, especially accessibility.
Debug hierarchy when it goes.
What was that? I'm sorry.
The explosion view, you're talking about like the debug hierarchy?
Yeah. Like I couldn't remember the name. I just like calling it explosion because it's it's exploded. That's what I've been calling it ever since I started like 8 years ago. So, but yeah, debug hierarchy, but it's like explosion view.
I think we need to talk.
Any other questions?
If anyone wants to. If there's any more questions for Dan, you can catch him in the Slack group. Another round of applause.
Thank you.
We're going to take 5 and then we'll be back with Mike's talk. So feel free to grab another slice of pizza or another drink, use the bathroom if you need, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Yep. All right, thanks everyone. I'll now hand over to Mike for his talk.
Hello. For a start, if you have any questions, you can just ask me during the talk. You don't need to wait, because I think there will be some topics that you may want to expand on or maybe ask other people what they're thinking about it. And I wanted to make this presentation to be a little bit generic, so it's not necessarily just about Apple frameworks, but if you're working in a web development or other parts of software engineering, it may also apply to your use case. So yeah, so beyond WWDC presentations, I want to start with this thing, ChatGPT. I guess I can suspect that most of you have already used that. And for those who haven't, it's a new chatbot from OpenAI that allows you to talk to some sort of bot. But the magic thing is that it knows context. It provides you very, very useful answers. And you can actually have some sort of human-like conversation with that bot. A very hot topic right now. And I even asked it today what ChatGPT thinks about using Swift UI in my project. And the answer is actually very, very useful. I mean, like, it gives me some solid points that some people can argue, but in general, I would say all of them, they are solid. And later, I also asked ChatGPT to provide me some code because I need to add a new view in my project that's gonna just spin emoji 360 degrees. And it turns out that I asked about it, copied to project, to Playground, and it just works. I mean, like, it's not very sophisticated view, as you can see, but it works. So that's impressive for a free tool for now. That's a good job because the syntax is correct. The structure is not super random. It just works. But why am I talking about it when my talk is about Apple frameworks, not OpenAI or chatbots on the web? Well, because Apple provides a lot of frameworks, especially over the past few years, because they are now selling watches, tablets, computers, phones, TV sets, et cetera, maybe this year, AR headset, we'll see. So here's a couple of them. You can see Siri, you can see Clock Kit, AR Kit, CoreML Health Kit, Widget Kit, I guess. In the next in the 3 months or 4 months, there's going to be WWDC 2023. Maybe in person this year. We'll see, because last year was hybrid. So hopefully we're gonna go back to the WW with labs, with engineers from all over the world. And also we can totally expect new frameworks during WWDC 2023. And Apple, of course, they know what's happening in the tech world. And they also want to utilize their tools, their hardware, their knowledge to give us more tools. So let's say that in 2023 WWDC, they're going to announce a new framework called Chat SRT, because it's a ChatGPT, so it's Chat Siri Responsive Talks. I know it's very funny, but it's just something that I need to come up with for needs of the talk. But I think the logo is pretty cool. So we can imagine that Craig is gonna enter the stage and gonna tell us how marvelous this framework is, how it utilizes all the new cool stuff that sits in our phones, tablets, how privacy friendly it is, and you can actually use it to have a real conversation with Siri. We'll see about that. So Chat SRT, let's assume that that's a new framework from Apple that allows us to add human-like conversations into our apps. without doing too much code. Well, here's the question: should I use it or not? After watching every WWDC for the past years, I've been asking this question myself very often, and so do my friends and my colleagues from work. We're pondering about it, if it's a good idea to add it to our project. Well, I guess from your experience, it depends. But when you go to WWDC Apple website, you can see they're gonna definitely tell you that, oh, it's a great framework, you need to use it ASAP. It's great, it's stable, just ship it. Your app's gonna be much better with it. But I'm not sure if it's the best approach to start using your framework. So I decided that I'm gonna cover 3 contexts, 3 separate contexts where you have a use case where you want to use the new framework in your app, in your project, or maybe in your business because you're an indie developer. So first case, and I think it's the most pleasant one, is for fun, because you probably have target iOS, now is iOS 16, maybe in that 3 months it's gonna be iOS 17. So you don't really care if majority of people are still using iOS 16, because sooner or later they're gonna use iOS 17, and you can use all the goodies like Swift charts right now. There's another context, because it helps you to get stuff done faster, better, or the result is gonna be more stable. There's less code, you name it. And third case is for work, because you're working in some, let's say you're working on a watch app, and WWDC 2019, they announced Swift UI, and that was one of few cases where you wanted to actually use the new framework, because Swift UI on watchOS is much better than WatchKit. Or you have some very niche business, or maybe Apple just shipped, let's say, new AR tool, and your business is doing, I don't know, like room planning, for instance. So it totally makes sense. Okay, we need to jump on it and integrate it into our project. Okay, so let's start with first case. First case is for fun. And a lot of people, they just love to dabble with new things. WWDC is over, so everybody's downloading the new beta. They are exploring what you can do with this new tool, how quickly you can achieve desired effect compared to previous frameworks, et cetera, et cetera. But it also gives you a good feedback, and you can see that our colleagues are approaching you and asking, oh, how did you test, let's say, Chat SRT? Is it good? Can you tell more about it? It's actually a good conversation starter, I notice, but it's also a good way to expand your knowledge, because if you have enough time to do that and you actually enjoy it, because there are some people who are just doing their work, but you actually like to test new stuff, it's great. You're definitely gonna benefit from it, even though it's not very stable, or you're not even gonna use it in your project or in your business. To be ahead, if you start learning in the beginning when there was still beta, or developers were still adding new APIs or fixing APIs, or you can report some bugs, you're definitely gonna be ahead compared to your colleagues or other people in the market. Because let's say you're gonna look for a job, and probably not many businesses gonna use the new API, but after some few months or maybe years, you already learn a lot of new stuff, so you don't need to catch up with your competition. Yeah, so it's also linked to the first point. it's fun. You have some shared interests. It's especially visible when you go to DubDub and you see all the engineers very hyped. They're downloading, they're sharing the knowledge. Even though it's, for some people, they're gonna say, but you're just coding something on an SDK that's been provided by a company because they want to sell devices. That's true. But on the other hand, some people just enjoy it. And I must say, it's a very nice thing to watch when people are having fun. They're seeing what's possible on their devices. It's just a lovely thing to observe. Okay, second context. Getting stuff done faster. So now we are entering the context where it's where the problems are a little bit more sophisticated. You're probably limited by iOS version or macOS version. And you probably already been using something. So since Apple announced Chat SRT, some of the goals that you want to achieve, they are already possible with SiriKit, for instance, or with speech synthesizer, or you maybe want to use your own model that's been trained in PyTorch, or you just download it from the internet and you can drop it to a CreateML and it's gonna generate a very handy API that you can use in your app. So if you want to get stuff done faster, it's vital to ask yourself, what is the problem with the current framework? Is the thing that you want to achieve is taking too much time? Or you're thinking, okay, there is some space, there is an area there's a space to improve in this part of the app that I've been working on. So for instance, I want to improve conversational part of the app because I'm making like medical chatbot. Okay, so maybe Chat SRT is gonna be much more helpful than me using third-party tool for a speech synthesizer or from Apple. But still, you may already have written a lot of lines of code for that. So to scrap it and use a new framework that is still fresh, it's something that I need to think about. How do I know that it will help me get stuff done faster? It's a good question, and I talked to some people, and they are also struggling with this problem because it's the most common thing over the past few years with UIKit and SwiftUI, I think, because you probably, I guess all of us, those who are working on Apple platforms, been interacting with UIKit, and they also start using SwiftUI because, well, in some screens or for some views, it's actually way easier to create in SwiftUI rather than UIKit. But on the other hand, later, when you realize that, okay, my view is very, very complex, it's actually much easier to do, let's say, in UIKit. I don't have any concrete examples, but I guess many of you can share the same sentiment. So it's good to pinpoint what is the most difficult part in my project in this framework that I've been using. I want to use the new framework. Does it actually make sense to replace that? Because later, that's from my experience when I replaced some view from UIKit with SwiftUI, it was very, very fast to reach like 80%, but the remaining 20% was like just struggling and fighting with SwiftUI system. Probably it was my fault, but again, for UIKit, we have much more documentation and help on Stack Overflow and other sources. Can I achieve desired result in existing framework? Yeah, so it's also linked to the second point. Maybe it's already done, so why bother rewriting it? Well, because maybe you want to use just the new framework. Okay, but can you say if it's possible to achieve this desired result in the new framework? And does it make sense to waste that time that you dedicated on writing it in a, let's say, UI kit, and now to do that in Swift UI. And the last context, the most challenging, I would say, it's for work. So if you want to use that at work, and you're in the position where you can say, okay, we need to use that, you need to respect your colleagues' opinions too, because they may say, you're wrong. Why should we use the new framework? Because it's new, because it's from Apple, but we're already using third-party framework and it works well for us. So why should we scrap all the work and start all over again? And that's a very valid question. Plus, our colleagues may not have enough time to practice, see, and explore the new API and tools. So it's going to be extra work for them, and maybe the company is not gonna dedicate extra time to catch up on a new shiny thing. There will be bugs, especially if we are integrating a new framework. So if you are in the position where you have to use new framework, well, you need to unfortunately deal with it. On the other hand, if you see, okay, there is a new UI framework like with Swift UI in 2019, you're probably already using AppKit or UIKit or WatchKit. If you want to upgrade to that, well, you need to be well aware of the fact that it's going to be buggy. Not super buggy, but in some areas it's going to be perfect. In areas where Apple polished it to the T, but in other parts, especially in those that were not covered by Apple, because they're very complex and they're very business specific or context specific, well, you may struggle. So it's something that you need to keep in mind. They're gonna show on WWDC in the videos, they're definitely gonna show you that, okay, you can achieve, you can create a chatbot in a matter of minutes. And that all looks great, but can you customize the chatbot to your needs? Can you retrain it? Can you add new words? Can you ask the bot to act as if the bot is, let's say, doctor? That might be a little bit difficult. But when you go to videos or tutorials, usually the simplest cases are covered. And it totally makes sense, right? Because as I said, more advanced use cases are highly context dependent. So if they're making WWDC videos, they want to make it very approachable, and also in the past few years, WW videos and WW itself got maybe a little bit more beginner friendly. So they cannot make a lot of advanced videos. They used to make for each major framework they used to make intro and advanced. So like with combined intro to combine and advanced combine, intro to Swift UI and advanced Swift UI. But I noticed that there are fewer and fewer videos where they cover very advanced topics, and there are no sample apps where they also presenting how to deal with challenging problems in the project. So it's also very important to keep that in mind. But still, if something goes wrong, at least from my experience, 80 or even 90%, it's my fault, because either I don't read the documentation or I just use the tool wrong. And it's notorious with Swift UI for some reason, even though I really like this framework because you can get, you can create UI elements much faster and you can reuse them in different platforms. If that's your case, that's great. If you only supporting iOS or Mac or tvOS, it's still pretty good. But Apple developers created that framework and they had some assumptions in their minds when they created it. And when I try to mess up with the boundaries of that framework, the result is usually pretty bad. And I don't really care about going to documentation, and it's of course my bad. But it's something that I'm trying to remind myself, and it's not easy, that it's a closed source framework. I cannot really edit it. I cannot really see the internals. So either I'm gonna deal with it or I'm gonna suffer from it. So usually it's my fault or I'm using it wrong. So it's my fault. Yeah, so, okay, we chose the framework and something goes wrong. What should we do? Fortunately, there are some options. And I would say this one is the most helpful from my experience. And some people didn't bother with it, but it's crucial when you, especially when you sure that there's a bug in the framework and you want to report that to Apple. In this case, Apple's gonna request for a sample code or for a mini project where you can present this issue. Because when you talk to them on a dub or when you call to them on Zoom, Cisco, whatever, WebEx, they're gonna ask you to present the code. And when you open the project with 1,000 lines view controller, they can get lost very quickly. Surprise, surprise. So it's much better to make a separate project, because you may also use things that are implicitly affecting that framework. So for instance, you're using singletons and they're being accessed globally or from wrong thread, and there are no warnings from this framework that, oh, you've been using it from wrong thread, because developers were busy with making this framework, not with debug tools. They're going to be added maybe later. But if you're going to isolate it, you can exclude all the external forces or objects or any other things that you're using in the project. So you can say, okay, there's something clearly wrong in the framework. Not because of me, not because I'm using it wrong, but actually, even in the simplest scenario, it's still not working. And unfortunately, I wasted probably dozens or hundreds of hours by debugging Apple frameworks and blaming them that they are wrong. But later, when I created a simple project, like in a matter of 1 hour, it turned out that, okay, it was something from my project, of course. So yeah. Look at books and docs. Docs are a little bit problematic if you want to read them for a new framework, because I remember with Combine, there was like literally no documentation, like at all. With SwiftUI, there was some, but you needed to wait at least a year or two when they started to actually providing solid documentation for API for views. And now it's, I would say it's pretty good. But again, we're choosing a new framework. So let's say it's like just announced, like Chat SRT, or maybe something that's been out for a couple of months. But well, you may not be interested in it at all. So let's at least you can just go and see if it's of any use. And books, of course, there are some smart developers who are expanding on Apple's frameworks and docs, and they're writing their own books. I would say the book from objc.io about SwiftUI was like indispensable. When they released that, I think a few months after SwiftUI announcement, this book, I think it's still better than Apple's documentation, and they actually dive deep into internals of SwiftUI. So for us, I mean, like for most of us who are professional developers who are just earning money from writing software, we have some difficult cases in our projects. So it's vital to actually understand how SwiftUI render system works, because later you can say, okay, maybe even though API allows for that, it might not be the best idea, because if it's still possible, it still may not be the best idea. Look for alternatives. So when they announced SwiftUI, a lot of people, they started to test the limits of the framework, and they wanted to verify if they can create 100% SwiftUI app. And well, with first version, that was straight up impossible, I guess. With second version, it got a little bit better. Now, I would say it's totally doable. There are probably also some limits because you still need to use a little bit of UIKit in some areas. But you can still use two frameworks at the same time. It's usually possible. It may be a little bit difficult if you have a if you want to use core data in Realm, for instance. That's going to be that might be not the best idea. But with UI, it's totally possible. With networking, you can use third-party networking and URL session. Maybe not the best idea again, but it's still possible, and it's highly context dependent. So you need to verify it by yourself. And sometimes you gonna come to conclusion that, okay, I need to use third-party framework with my UI framework, and it's fine. But there was when you go on the internet, you may read that, okay, it's not the best idea to mix combine with async await to UIKit through SwiftUI. Well, at work, you need to get your job done and not to look if my app is 100% async await or 100% SwiftUI. Check out our environments. It's a little bit problematic with SwiftUI again, because there are some things that are rendering properly in the preview, and there are some things that are not working simulator, and there are some things that are not working on the device. Yeah, and I'm still forgetting about it, but I need to remind myself that, okay, test all environments and focus on those that are having the biggest usage for now. So for instance, majority of users are now on iOS 16 plus something. They're using iPhone. So that's where I need to be, or that's where I need to focus on. But again, Apple developers, they may take the same approach that, okay, we need to focus mostly on iOS. There might be some bugs on Mac or Watch. And we unfortunately need to respect that. That they are also making some mistakes. They also need to ship that framework. They have some time limits. So submit developer ticket. You can submit it, but it's better to submit it with project, because the response gonna come quicker, and it's gonna be more helpful for them to debug it in their local environments, not to search where's the problem when you send them, let's say, a sample from your project or just a few lines of code. If they can reproduce that on a separate project that you sent them, they actually get back to you pretty quickly. With some problems, you cannot overcome them, but you can play the long game. You can just wait, because sometimes there's an issue that you cannot resolve. And Apple is well aware of that, maybe even before the release. But they said, okay, well, we have some time constraints, so we cannot cover everything and we need to ship it. So you can also take the same approach. So with Swift UI, you cannot do, for instance, you cannot do the separators until iOS 15, I guess. So you can cover them for now. And let's say on iOS 13, and the percentage of users on iOS 13 and 14 is very, very small. So, okay, they're not gonna have the best experience, but we can focus more on different part of the app, not just the nitty gritty UI details. So if you can do that, that's something that you can also consider, because why bother with tweaking the separator for 5 or 10 hours UI kit or rewriting the whole list? You can just cover it and hope and pray that they're gonna fix it in the next release. But if you're working on a big project where the minimum target is low, it can get a little bit problematic. So again, something that you need to consider with your team, with your business owner, with your manager, name it. So a lot of problems, as you can see. So why even bother with using frameworks, you may ask? Well, because they usually quite useful, you might say. But on the other hand, they cannot cover all the cases. And I wanted to, at the end, I wanted to put also emphasize this fact that Apple is also not only a hardware company, but now it's also services company, but also they provide software. They provide software in the form of frameworks that we are using to provide software to clients, to friends, to other people, to businesses. And they also usually working, they also have the similar rules. So they also have some deadlines, they also have some goals. They also have limits when it comes to engineers. People come and go, but they need to release it because engineers need to start using it. So it might be buggy, and they know it. They can fix it later. And we also need to be aware of that because they are shipping a ton of new code and new hardware and new software, especially the past few years when you compare it to 2012, for instance. They are providing frameworks with complexity that is way bigger that's been in the old frameworks, let's say 10 years ago. I'm just guessing, but I can guess it's not, it's probably right. So it's something that's worth mentioning at this point with complexity. Swift UI, especially at the beginning, was a little bit buggy, little bit, but now it's getting better. So I think it's a prime example of my assumption that they need to ship a framework that is not perfect, has a lot of flaws at the beginning, but they're gonna make it better gradually. You can expect more bugs, especially with frameworks like Swift UI, that is like an umbrella for all UI frameworks in Apple world. So for a watch, for a Mac, for iOS. Those frameworks themselves, they also have bugs. And now you have some sort of new framework that's using new syntax, new paradigm that's reactive. It can generate a lot of problems that cannot be covered even if they spent 10 years on it. Because at some point you just need to ship it and you need to collect feedback from developers. So it's kind of on purpose. You see that on DubDub, a lot of simple to-do lists, conference apps, or take photo and label it. Well, they need to provide you something. and it cannot be too intimidating. So it kind of makes sense to provide to-do list or a conference app. But when you're working on it, and I sometimes notice I just grumbling on the state of a given framework that is not very stable or it doesn't work. Well, the challenges that businesses are facing now with phones that are having 6.7 inch screen, 5.5, 4.5, 4.0, different processors, cellular conditions, accessibility preferences, they cannot cover it all. So we need to respect that they shipped something, and now we're kind of testers, and some people can be bothered with that fact because, well, we pay each year money for a developer license, we're paying for devices, we're paying for, or companies are paying for training, but well, they're also a company that is providing software and they cannot overcome, even though they have a lot of money, but they cannot overcome this problem. One way they can ship it, version 1.0, let's say, Chat SRT, it cannot act as if you're talking to doctor or nurse or engineer or your friend, but the next version is going to be better, and the next version is going to be better, the next version is going to be better. So if you need to have something very specific for your business right now, and third-party frameworks already providing that, well, you can think, okay, maybe we can plan some sort of transition periods. So for now, for the next 1, 2, 3 years, we're going to use the tool that we're already using. But we're going to observe how it's going to evolve with Apple, because in a lot of cases, the provided framework, it's better than third party, but it's going to take time to get there. And the last point, I asked ChatGPT, because I started with it, so I wanted to close with it. I asked, why would I use Swift UI for my project? The answer was pretty solid. I asked the opposite, why shouldn't I use new framework? And the answer is, again, pretty good, I would say. Lack of stability, compatibility. It's not going to work with Xcode, with Intel, with Apple Silicon. You need to learn it. It's going to take time. No documentation. And there is also risk that this framework may not satisfy your business or your personal needs. I asked for these points after I have written the presentation. So I wanted to verify if it's gonna be if it's gonna align with my points, and kind of all of the points I think cover them. And yeah, the ChatGPT only confirmed that there are some challenges that you need to be aware of with new tool. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Great talk. Do we have any questions?
I've got one. Mike, what do you do? What's your business, or who do you work for?
I'm a contractor, so usually the companies that are coming to me are having a very specific needs. I also been managing one product for the past 4 or 5 years already. That is iOS plus Watch. Yeah, and I know that some of the points are I'm a little bit biased because I haven't been working for a big company for a couple of years already, and the companies and clients are usually remote. My main gig is also remote, so I know that there are some other factors that are playing a huge role that I'm not aware of, but some of them they're also shared.
So it's sort of like an indie for hire, eh?
You can call it like that. Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, but an excellent talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, another round of applause for Mike.
Should I disconnect?
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mike, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Appreciate you all being here. We'll catch you next month. I will post the details on Meetup to the event, and otherwise get home safely. Thank you.